The stars burned bright in the Vaxari home system, but not from their natural light. Entire worlds were on fire, their cities melting under the relentless bombardment from the Korath war fleet. Ambassador Zeth Ka floated in the command center of the last surviving Vaxari station, watching through the viewing ports as his people's civilization died. His long, graceful limbs trembled as he worked at the communication console. The Vaxari were a peaceful race, tall and thin like reeds swaying in a gentle breeze. They had never known war until the Korath Empire arrived 6 months ago. Now, of the 17 member worlds of their coalition, only 3 remained, and those would fall within days. Ambassador, the Korath fleet is moving toward Vel Prime, reported Communications Officer Yel Din, her voice barely a whisper. Our defensive ships, they cannot hold them. Zeth Ka nodded sadly. He had seen this same scene play out on world after world. The Korath were brutal and efficient. They gave no quarter, took no prisoners, and left nothing but ash behind. Their massive black ships moved through space like hungry predators, and their weapons could crack a planet's crust. Send the message to the hegemony, Zeth Ka ordered, his 4-fingered hands dancing across the controls. Tell them what has happened here. Tell them the Korath must be stopped. The hegemony was their only hope. They were the great protectors of the galaxy, a confederation of powerful species that had kept peace for over 1,000 years. Their fleets were legendary, their warriors fierce, and their honor absolute. If anyone could stop the Korath, it would be them. But as Zeth Ka prepared the distress signal, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The Korath had found them. Energy beams lanced through space, striking the station's shields and causing the entire structure to shudder. Sparks flew from damaged consoles and the lights flickered. We're taking heavy damage, Yel Din called out, struggling to maintain her position as the station rocked under the assault. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Zeth Ka worked frantically at the communication array. The coordinates for the hegemony core worlds were stored in the computer, but the system was damaged. Warning lights flashed red as he tried to lock onto the distant signal beacon that would guide their message to safety. Another massive impact shook the station. Zeth Ka was thrown against the console and he felt something wet on his forehead. Blue blood, the color of deep ocean water, trickled down his face. The communication array sparked and several panels went dark. The coordinates are corrupted, he gasped, staring at the flickering display. The numbers were wrong, but he couldn't tell by how much. I cannot get a clear lock on the hegemony beacon. Ambassador, we have maybe 2 minutes before they break through our shields, Yel Din warned. If you're going to send the message, it has to be now. Zeth Ka looked at the damaged coordinates one more time. They were definitely wrong, but he had no choice. Maybe the message would still reach someone in hegemony space. Maybe they would forward it to the right authorities. Maybe there was still hope. To the great protectors of the hegemony, he spoke into the communication device, his voice steady despite his fear. Our worlds burn. Our people die. The Korath show no mercy. We are the last of 17 civilizations. Please, if honor means anything to you, help us. He hit the transmission button just as the station's shields finally collapsed. The message shot out into space, carried by quantum waves toward what he hoped were friendly stars. The signal traveled for days, crossing vast, empty regions of space where no ships had ever ventured. It passed through asteroid fields and around dead planets growing weaker with each light year. But it kept going, following the damaged coordinates toward a small yellow star that most galactic maps didn't even bother to mark. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Carter was finishing her shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station in the Nevada desert. It was quiet work, mostly listening to natural radio signals from distant stars and watching for any signs of asteroid threats. She had been doing this job for 8 years and had never seen anything more exciting than a particularly active pulsar. That changed at 11:43 p.m. when every alarm in the facility started screaming at once. What the hell? She muttered, rushing to her console. The displays were showing something impossible. A signal was coming in from outside the solar system, and it wasn't natural. It was clearly artificial, with complex patterns that suggested intelligence. "Lisa, are you seeing this?" called out Dr. Rick Martinez from across the room. He was staring at his own screens with wide eyes. "This is not from Earth. This is not from anywhere in our system." Lisa's hands shook as she began recording the YAI signal and running it through the computer analysis programs. The pattern was unlike anything in their databases, but there was something about it that seemed familiar. It had structure, rhythm, almost like language. "Get Director Coleman on the line," she told Rick, "and wake up the linguistics team. We're going to need everyone." For the next 6 hours, the team worked to decode the alien message. They ran it through every translation program they had, compared it to mathematical constants, and tried to find any pattern that made sense. It was Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's linguistics expert, who finally cracked it. "It's a distress call," she announced to the exhausted team. "They're asking for help. Someone called the Korath is destroying their worlds, and they're begging someone called the Hegemony to save them." The room fell silent. Lisa stared at the translated message on her screen, reading it over and over again. This was first contact with an alien civilization, and they were dying. "We need to contact Washington immediately," Director Coleman said quietly, "and the UN. This changes everything." Within hours, the message was on the desk of President Helen Rodriguez. She sat in the Oval Office at 3 a.m, reading the translation while her advisors argued about what it might mean. "They think we're someone else," said Secretary of Defense Tony Walsh. "This hegemony they're talking about, the signal wasn't meant for us." "But it reached us," the president replied, looking up from the papers. "An entire civilization is being wiped out, and somehow their cry for help found its way to Earth." Admiral Jake Morrison, head of the newly formed United Defense Fleet, leaned forward in his chair. "Ma'am, with respect, this isn't our fight. We don't even know these people. And we certainly don't have the military capability to fight an interstellar war." President Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Washington Monument in the distance. "Admiral, what if you were wrong? What if we do have the capability? What if we're exactly what they need?" She turned back to face the room. "Gentlemen, in 6 hours I'm calling an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. We're going to discuss Operation Shepherd." "Operation Shepherd?" asked the Secretary of Defense. "We're going to see if humanity can answer that call for help," the president said firmly, "because sometimes the right message reaches exactly the right people, even if it was sent to the wrong address." The Global Defense Council meeting lasted 14 hours. Representatives from every major nation sat around a massive table in Geneva, their faces reflecting the weight of the decision before them. President Rodriguez had laid out the facts. An alien distress call had reached Earth, an entire civilization was being destroyed, and humanity had to decide whether to answer. "This is madness," declared Chancellor Weber of the European Federation. "We're talking about sending our military into space to fight aliens we know nothing about. It could be a trap, or worse, it could start a war we cannot win." Prime Minister Chen of the Pacific Alliance nodded in agreement. "Our space fleet is barely 2 years old. We have 12 ships designed for asteroid defense, not interstellar combat. What can we possibly do against an empire that has already destroyed 17 worlds?" Admiral Morrison stood up at the head of the table, his uniform crisp despite the long hours. "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand your concerns, but let me tell you what we've learned from analyzing that signal." He activated a holographic display that showed star charts and trajectory calculations. The message traveled for over 3 weeks to reach us. During that time, our computers have been working to trace its path backwards. We now know exactly where it came from, and our satellites have detected massive energy signatures in that region. Something big is happening there, and it's not natural. Dr. Carter stepped forward from her position near the wall. The signal also contained embedded data we initially missed: stellar coordinates, technical specifications, even what appears to be a basic dictionary of their language. These people weren't just calling for help. They were trying to give us everything. We would need to find them. President Rodriguez looked around the table at the faces of the world leaders. "The question before us is simple. Do we have the right to ignore suffering just because it's happening to people we've never met? The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the vote was closer than expected. 12 nations voted to proceed with Operation Shepherd, 8 voted against and 3 abstained. It was enough. Within days, the United Defense Fleet was preparing for humanity's first interstellar military mission. Captain Ryan Phillips stood on the bridge of the UES Valkyrie, watching his crew make final preparations. The Valkyrie was Earth's newest and most advanced warship, equipped with experimental fusion drives, quantum communication arrays, and enough firepower to level a small city. "Captain, engineering reports all systems green," called out Lieutenant Maria Santos from her station. She was a compact woman with calloused hands and grease under her fingernails, the kind of person who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. "Tactical systems are online," reported Lieutenant Ben Clark, a former fighter pilot who had trained on every weapon system in the fleet. "All missile tubes loaded, railguns charged, and defensive systems ready." Dr. Alex Turner looked up from his scientific station, his face pale with excitement and fear. As the mission's xenobiologist, he would be humanity's first expert on alien life. "Captain, I've finished analyzing the linguistic data from the signal. I think I can establish basic communication if we encounter survivors." Captain Phillips nodded to each of them. At 35, he was young for a ship's captain, but he had earned his position through skill and courage. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and led rescue missions to Mars colonies. But this was different. This time, humanity itself was depending on him. "All ships report ready for departure," announced Communications Officer Katie Walsh. The fleet consisted of 12 vessels, 3 heavy cruisers, 4 destroyers, 3 support ships, and 2 specialized carriers loaded with fighters and marines. "Very well," Captain Phillips said, settling into his command chair. "All ships, this is Valkyrie Actual. We are go for Operation Shepherd. Jump in 3, 2, 1, mark." Space around the fleet twisted and folded as the experimental FTL drives activated. The stars stretched into lines, reality bent, and suddenly they were gone, racing toward a distant star system where aliens were fighting and dying. The journey would take 6 days, and during that time, the crew prepared for whatever they might find. Dr. Turner worked with the linguistics team to refine their translation programs. Lieutenant Santos and her engineers modified weapons and shields based on energy readings from the alien signal. Lieutenant Clark ran combat simulations, trying to guess what kind of tactics an alien military might use. On the 3rd day, they received new intelligence. The Deep Space Monitoring Station had picked up additional signals from the target system, and the news was grim. The energy signatures were getting weaker, which meant the defending aliens were losing ground rapidly. "We may be too late," Dr. Turner said quietly as he briefed Captain Phillips on the latest data. "If the pattern continues, their last stronghold will fall before we arrive." Captain Phillips studied the reports in his ready room, a small office, behind the bridge where he could think without distraction. Through the window he could see stars streaming past as they raced toward their destination. Somewhere ahead, people were dying while calling for help that might never come. "Doctor, in your opinion, what are the chances that this Korath Empire will still be in the system when we arrive?" Dr. Turner considered the question carefully. "Based on their pattern of attack, I'd say very high. They seem to be methodical, completely destroying each world before moving on. If there are survivors to rescue, the Korath will still be there hunting them." "Then we'll give them something new to hunt," the captain said grimly. On the 5th day, long-range sensors began picking up the target system. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. 3 planets showed massive radiation signatures consistent with orbital bombardment. Space was filled with debris that had once been ships and stations, and moving through it all were the massive dark shapes of the Korath fleet. Lieutenant Clark studied the sensor readings with growing concern. "Captain, those ships are huge. The smallest one is twice the size of our largest cruiser, and there are at least 20 of them. Any sign of survivors?" Phillips asked. Katie Walsh worked at her communication station scanning for any friendly signals. "I'm picking up weak transmissions from the 3rd planet. It looks like there's still some kind of base or colony down there, but they're not responding to our hails." They probably think we're more Korath ships, Dr. Turner suggested. We need to get closer and try to establish communication. Captain Phillips made his decision. All ships, battle stations, we're going in. Lieutenant Clark, what's our best approach? The tactical officer studied his displays. The Korath fleet is concentrated around the third planet. If we drop out of FTL on the system's edge, we can observe them before they detect us. Maybe learn something about their capabilities. Do it. As the human fleet prepared to drop back into normal space, none of them knew they were about to encounter something the galaxy had never seen before. The Korath Empire had conquered dozens of species, each one rolling over after a brief resistance. They had developed tactics and technologies specifically designed to break the will of civilized races, but they had never fought anyone from Earth. Captain Phillips looked around his bridge one last time, seeing his crew at their stations, ready to fight and die for people they had never met. It struck him that this was perhaps the most human thing they could do, travel across the galaxy to help strangers, knowing they were probably outgunned and outnumbered. All ships drop out of FTL in 10 seconds, he announced. Let's go see what we're up against. The stars stopped streaming, space returned to normal, and for the first time in galactic history, a human military force arrived at an alien battlefield, ready to change the course of an interstellar war. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Korthak system, and what they saw made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The third planet, Vel Prime, glowed red like a dying ember. Massive craters covered its surface where cities had once stood. In orbit around the wounded world, 23 enormous Korath warships moved in lazy circles like vultures waiting for their prey to die. Captain Phillips gripped his command chair as he studied the tactical display. "My God," he whispered, "what kind of monsters do this to entire planets?" Lieutenant Clark worked frantically at his station, analyzing the alien ships. "Captain, those vessels are unlike anything in our databases. The largest one is over 2 kilometers long, and it's putting out energy readings that are off the charts. Their weapons appear to be some kind of plasma-based system." "Any sign of defending ships?" Phillips asked. "Negative, sir. I'm seeing debris fields that might have been defensive fleets, but nothing active." "Wait." Clark's eyes widened as he looked at his screens. "Captain, I'm detecting life signs on Vel Prime. Faint, but definitely there. Someone's still alive down there." Communications Officer Walsh looked up from her station. "Sir, I'm picking up a weak signal from the planet's surface. It's the same language as the distress call we received on Earth. They're asking for anyone to respond." Dr. Turner moved to Walsh's station and began working with the translation software they had developed during the journey. After several minutes, he turned to the captain with a grim expression. "They're trapped in underground bunkers," he reported. "Maybe a few 100,000 survivors out of a population that was once in the millions. They're asking if anyone from the hegemony has come to help them." Captain Phillips made his decision. "Open a channel to the planet. Let's see if our translation program works both ways." Walsh nodded and activated the communication system. Dr. Turner spoke slowly and clearly, hoping the computer would convert his words into something the aliens could understand. "This is Captain Ryan Phillips of the Earthship Valkyrie. We received your distress call. We are here to help." The response came back almost immediately, filled with excitement and confusion. Dr. Turner listened as the translation program converted the alien words into English. "They're asking who Earth is," he said. "They've never heard of us. They want to know if we're part of the hegemony fleet." "Tell them we're friends," Phillips ordered, "and ask them about the Korath ships in orbit." Before Dr. Turner could send the message, alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. Lieutenant Clark looked up from his tactical display with alarm. "Captain, the Korath fleet is changing course. They've detected us and they're moving to intercept. Estimated time to weapons range, 12 minutes. Phillips studied the tactical situation. 12 human ships against 23 alien warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything Earth had ever built. By any reasonable calculation, they were about to be destroyed. "All ships, this is Valkyrie Actual," he announced over the fleet communication channel. "Form defensive formation Alpha. Prepare for combat against superior numbers. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for every person still alive on that planet. The human fleet quickly arranged itself into a battle formation. They had practiced countless times but never used in actual combat. The 3 heavy cruisers formed the center, with destroyers flanking them and the carriers hanging back to launch fighters. As the Korath fleet approached, Captain Phillips got his first close look at the aliens who had destroyed 17 civilizations. The enemy ships were massive, dark things that looked more like spaceborne predators than constructed vessels. They moved with surprising grace for their size, and energy readings showed their weapons charging. Incoming transmission from the Korath fleet, Walsh reported. Put it through. The alien voice that came through the speakers was deep and harsh, like gravel being ground together. Dr. Turner's translation program struggled with the different language structure, but the meaning came through clearly enough. Unknown vessels, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed. This system is now property of the Korath Empire. Resistance is futile. Phillips looked around his bridge at his crew. Lieutenant Santos was ready at her engineering station, keeping the ship's systems running at peak efficiency. Lieutenant Clark had his weapons targeted and ready. Dr. Turner was recording everything for humanity's first diplomatic contact with a hostile alien species. Walsh was maintaining communication with the fleet and the survivors on the planet. Open a channel to the Korath fleet, Phillips ordered. When the connection was established, he spoke in the calm, steady voice that had carried him through every crisis of his military career. This is Captain Ryan Phillips of the United Earth. Ship Valkyrie. You will cease your attack on these people immediately and withdraw from this system. The response was immediate laughter, a sound like metal being torn apart. Earth? We have never heard of such a place. You must be some minor coalition world we have not yet conquered. No matter, your ships will burn with the rest. The first Korath vessel opened fire, sending a massive plasma beam streaking toward the UES Washington, one of the human cruisers. Captain Phillips watched on the tactical display as the alien weapon struck the Washington shields. What happened next surprised everyone, including the humans. The Washington shields held. The experimental defensive systems that Earth's engineers had designed absorbed the plasma blast and converted it into power for the ship's own systems. Instead of being destroyed, the Washington actually grew stronger. All ships, return fire, Phillips ordered. The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Railguns accelerated metal slugs to incredible velocities. Missile salvos streaked across space trailing fire. Energy weapons designed to punch through asteroid hulls struck the Korath ships with devastating effect. The battle that followed would be analyzed by military historians for generations. The Korath, accustomed to fighting fragile coalition species, discovered that humans built their ships differently. Every system had backups. Every critical component was armored. Every weapon was designed to keep firing even when the ship was heavily damaged. Lieutenant Steve Hamilton led the first human fighter squadron into combat, his small craft diving between the massive Korath ships like angry hornets. The alien, point defense systems calibrated for larger targets, couldn't track the fighters as they performed maneuvers that would have killed any other known species. Valkyrie, this is Eagle 1, Hamilton reported over the radio. These alien ships have weak points at their engine clusters. My fighters are making attack runs now. Phillips watched on his tactical display as Hamilton's squadron destroyed 3 Korath cruisers in less than 5 minutes, using attack patterns that took advantage of human pilots' ability to withstand crushing acceleration forces. The Korath commander, War Commander Thex, stared at his battle displays in disbelief. His fleet, which had never lost a major engagement, was being torn apart by ships less than half their size. These unknown aliens fought with a savagery and skill he had never encountered. War Commander, reported his tactical officer, we have lost 6 ships and taken heavy damage to 8 others. Their weapons are penetrating our shields, and their small craft are faster than our targeting systems. Thex watched another of his cruisers explode as human fighters swarmed around it like predators bringing down larger prey. This was impossible. The coalition species were weak, civilized beings who surrendered after minimal resistance. These new aliens fought like demons. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Full retreat. Send a priority message to High Command. Unknown species encountered. Military capabilities beyond all previous encounters. Recommend immediate reinforcement. As the surviving Korath ships fled the system, Captain Phillips opened communication with the planet's surface. This is Captain Phillips to Vel Prime survivors. The Korath fleet has withdrawn. You are safe for now. The response came back filled with amazement and gratitude. Dr. Turner translated as best he could. They're asking who we are, he said. They want to know how 12 ships defeated a Korath battle fleet. They're saying it's impossible. Phillips looked at his bridge crew, all of them exhausted but victorious. They had just fought humanity's first interstellar battle and won against impossible odds.
Tell them, he said quietly, that we're from a place called Earth, and that when someone calls for help, we answer. As news of the battle spread through both fleets, no one yet understood what had really happened. The galaxy was about to discover
that evolution on a hostile world had created something new, a species that didn't just survive war but excelled at it. In the hours following the battle, the human fleet established orbit around Vel Prime and began rescue operations. Captain Phillips sent down shuttles loaded with medical supplies and emergency equipment, but what Dr. Elena Ross found when she reached the survivor bunkers changed everything humanity thought it knew about alien life. The Vaxari were beautiful in their own way, tall and graceful with long limbs and large, gentle eyes. But as Dr. Ross began treating their wounded, she made a discovery that sent chills down her spine. These beings were incredibly fragile. Their bones were hollow like bird bones, their skin was thin as paper, and their internal organs seemed designed for a world with much lower gravity than Earth. Captain, she reported over her communicator. I need to speak with you privately. It's about the aliens. Phillips met her in one of the survivor bunkers, a reinforced cave system carved deep into Vel Prime's crust. Ambassador Zeth Ka was there as well, his tall form folded carefully into a chair that had been designed for his species. Dr. Turner was working nearby with translation equipment. What's wrong, Doctor? Phillips asked. Dr. Ross looked uncomfortable. Sir, I've been examining the Vaxari physiology and there's something you need to understand. These people couldn't survive on Earth for more than a few minutes. Our gravity would crush their bones. Our atmosphere is too dense for their lungs. Even our normal walking pace would be a dead run for them. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Captain, compared to these people, we're like walking tanks. Our muscle density, our bone structure, our cardiovascular system, everything about us is built for a world that would kill them instantly. Ambassador Zeth Ka had been listening through the translation system, and he spoke up in his soft musical voice. Dr. Turner converted his words to English. He says he wants to know about our home world, Turner reported. He's asking about the gravity, the atmosphere, the climate. Phillips looked at the alien ambassador, seeing the curiosity and fear in his large eyes. Tell him Earth has gravity about 3 times stronger than this world. Our atmosphere is thick and rich with oxygen. We have violent storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, and predators that hunt other predators. As Dr. Turner translated, Zeth Ka's expression changed from curiosity to horror. He spoke rapidly, his voice rising with what sounded like panic. He says that's impossible, Turner translated. No complex life could evolve on such a world. He's asking if we're some kind of artificial beings, created by the hegemony as weapons. Dr. Ross pulled up data on her tablet and showed it to the captain. Sir, I've been analyzing the information they've given us about their home world. Low gravity, stable climate, no major predators, no natural disasters. It's basically paradise compared to Earth. And the Korath? Phillips asked. According to the data, they're from a slightly heavier world, but still nothing compared to Earth. They're stronger than the Vaxari, but they're built for conquest through technology and numbers, not physical capability. The implications hit Phillips like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just answered an alien distress call. They had revealed themselves to a galaxy where they were the monsters. Meanwhile, in Korath space, War Commander Thex stood before the High Command Council in the capital city of Morgak Prime. The chamber was vast and dark, filled with the most powerful military leaders in the Empire. At the center sat Field Marshal Crix, supreme commander of all Korath forces. Explain to me, Crick said in his deep, rumbling voice, how 12 unknown ships destroyed 6 of our cruisers and forced a full battle fleet to retreat. Thex activated a holographic display showing the battle data. Field Marshal, we have never encountered anything like these beings. Their ships absorbed our plasma fire and converted it to power. Their fighters moved in patterns that should have liquefied their pilots. Their weapons penetrated our shields as if they were not there. The council chamber filled with murmurs of disbelief. For 300 years, the Korath Empire had been unstoppable. They had developed tactics and weapons specifically designed to break the will of civilized species. No one had ever matched them in direct combat. Perhaps they are hegemony forces, suggested War Commander Vex from her position near the wall. The Coalition distress call was meant for them. No, Vex replied firmly. I studied the tactical data. These are not hegemony ships or tactics. This is something new, something we have never seen before. Field Marshal Crix stood up, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. At over 3 meters tall, he was large even by Korath standards, and his presence commanded absolute attention. Send probe ships to investigate this Earth, they mentioned. I want to know everything about these beings, their technology, their numbers, their weaknesses. He paused, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. If they are truly powerful, they will either join our empire or be destroyed. There is no third option. Back on Vel Prime, Captain Phillips was learning more disturbing information about the galaxy his species had just entered. Ambassador Zeth Ka had provided star charts and historical data about the various alien civilizations, and the picture that emerged was troubling. According to these records, Dr. Turner explained as he studied the data, most species in this region of the galaxy evolved on what we would consider garden worlds, stable climates, low gravity, abundant resources. War, when it happens, is usually brief and involves minimal casualties. Lieutenant Clark looked up from his tactical analysis. Captain, if that's true, then the Korath Empire isn't just evil. They're an aberration. They're probably the most militaristic species this galaxy has ever produced. Until now, Dr. Ross said quietly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Phillips walked to the bunker entrance and looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, humanity's homeworld continued its eternal dance around a yellow sun. Earth, with its violent weather and crushing gravity, its evolutionary arms race between predators and prey, its history written in the bones of species that had learned to kill or be killed. Dr. Turner, he said finally, ask Ambassador Zeth K about the hegemony. Who are they really? What makes them the galaxy's protectors? Turner spoke with the alien ambassador for several minutes before turning back to the captain. He says the hegemony is a confederation of the 5 most advanced species in the galaxy. They maintain peace through superior technology and the threat of economic sanctions. They rarely use military force because most conflicts can be resolved through diplomacy. Have they ever faced anything like the Korath? Phillips asked. No, Turner replied after another exchange. The Korath Empire is the most aggressive military force the galaxy has seen in over 1,000 years. That's why the Coalition sent their distress call to the hegemony. They were hoping for protection from the galaxy's traditional peacekeepers. Phillips made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Dr. Turner, send a message to Earth. Tell them what we've learned. Tell them that we're not just in a war with the Korath Empire. We're in a galaxy where we're the most dangerous species that has ever evolved. As the message began its journey back to Earth, Phillips couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. The Vaxari had sent their distress call to the wrong coordinates, but it had reached exactly the right species, not because humanity was more advanced than the hegemony, but because they were more dangerous. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the best protectors were the ones who had evolved to be predators, and sometimes the wrong signal reached exactly the right people to answer it. Over the next few days, as human engineers worked to repair damage to Vel Prime and evacuate survivors, reports began coming in from across Korath space. Probe ships were investigating Earth's location. Military buildup was occurring on multiple worlds. The Empire was preparing for war. Captain Phillips stood on his bridge, looking at star charts that showed the positions of human and Korath forces. They were outnumbered by thousands to one, facing an enemy that had conquered 17 civilizations and was now focused entirely on destroying Earth. But for the first time since receiving that alien distress call, he was starting to understand why it had taken humanity to answer it. The galaxy was full of civilized species who fought wars with rules and honor. What it needed was a species that fought wars to win, no matter the cost. What it needed was humanity. The emergency session of Earth's Global Defense Council convened exactly 18 hours after Captain Phillips's message reached home. President Rodriguez stood at the head of the conference table in Geneva, her face grim as she read from the intelligence report that had arrived through quantum communication. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "the situation has changed dramatically. Our fleet has successfully engaged and defeated a Korath battle group, but in doing so, we have revealed humanity's existence to a hostile interstellar empire. According to Captain Phillips's report, they are now mobilizing their entire military to attack Earth." Chancellor Weber of the European Federation leaned forward in his chair. "Madam President, what are we talking about in terms of numbers?" "Admiral, Morrison activated the holographic display that showed data gathered by the Valkyrie's intelligence officers. Based on captured Korath communications, we're looking at a force of over 500 warships, possibly more. They have industrial capacity spread across dozens of worlds, and a military that has been fighting continuously for 3 centuries. The room fell silent as the representatives absorbed the magnitude of what they were facing. Prime Minister Singh of the Indian Confederation spoke first. "Admiral, how many ships do we have that are capable of interstellar combat?" 12, Morrison replied bluntly. "The same ships that are currently protecting the Vaxari survivors." "Then we're dead," Chancellor Weber said flatly. "There's no way 12 ships can hold off 500, no matter how effective our tactics proved against a smaller force." President Rodriguez looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. She saw fear, certainly, but also something else. The same stubborn determination that had carried humanity through every crisis in its history. "Admiral Morrison," she said, "how long would it take to mobilize our entire space-capable fleet?" Morrison consulted his tablet. "If we convert every ship that can reach orbit, including civilian vessels, we could put together maybe 200 ships. Most of them wouldn't be military grade, but they could carry troops, supplies, and additional weapons." "How long?" 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we push the shipyards to their limits." President Rodriguez made the decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "Do it. Operation Deliverance is now our highest priority. Every available resource goes to the fleet buildup. We're not going to sit here and wait for the Korath to come to us." "Ma'am," interrupted Secretary Walsh, "are you suggesting we take our entire military into space and launch an offensive war against an interstellar empire?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting," Rodriguez replied. "Captain Phillips's report makes it clear that we can't match the Korath in numbers or technology. But we have something they don't expect. We have the element of surprise, and we have the advantage of being from a world that breeds survivors." The vote was unanimous. Every nation on Earth committed their resources to Operation Deliverance, the largest military mobilization in human history. Within days, shipyards from Houston to Shanghai were working around the clock. Civilian freighters were being fitted with armor plating and weapons systems. Passenger liners were converted into troop transports. Even luxury yachts were modified to carry supplies and communications equipment. Marine Colonel Sam Parker stood in the briefing room at the Lunar Military Base, addressing the largest gathering of human soldiers ever assembled. Over 50,000 Marines, Army Rangers, and Special Forces operators from every nation on Earth sat before him, all volunteers for humanity's first interstellar war. "People," Parker began, "you all know why we're here. Captain Phillips and the Valkyrie fleet are holding the line against an empire that has destroyed 17 civilizations. They're buying us time to get there and even the odds." He activated a display showing tactical information gathered from the battle at Vel Prime. "The good news is that our equipment works against alien technology. Our ships can take their hits, and give back worse. Our fighters are faster than their targeting systems. Our weapons can penetrate their defenses. The room was completely silent as Parker continued. The bad news is that we're going up against an enemy that outnumbers us by thousands to one. They have more ships, more soldiers, and they've been fighting wars longer than our species has been building cities. A hand went up in the audience. Staff Sergeant Lucy Chen, one of Earth's top fighter pilots, stood up. Colonel, what makes Command think we can win this? Parker smiled grimly. Sergeant, have you ever studied the history of asymmetric warfare? Small forces defeating larger ones through superior tactics, better training, and sheer determination? Yes, sir. Then you know that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. The Korath Empire has gotten used to easy victories against civilized opponents. They've never fought anyone from Earth. As the human armada prepared for departure, intelligence reports were coming in from deep space monitoring stations. Korath scout ships had been detected at the edge of the solar system, conducting surveillance on Earth's defenses. More disturbing, energy signatures suggested that a massive fleet was assembling in Korath space. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Enterprise, humanity's newest and largest warship. Built in record time using technology reverse-engineered from captured Korath equipment, the Enterprise was a kilometer long and carried enough firepower to level a continent. Admiral, reported Captain Lisa Hayes, the Enterprise's commanding officer. All ships report ready for departure. The Armada is assembled and waiting your orders. Morrison looked out at the fleet through the bridge windows. Over 200 ships hung in space around Earth, everything from massive battleships to converted cargo haulers. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, and it represented the combined might of every nation on the planet. But more than that, it represented something the galaxy had never seen before, an entire species mobilizing for war, not for conquest or resources, but to protect strangers they had never met. All ships. This is Admiral Morrison, he announced over the fleet communication channel. Today, we depart for the Korthak system to reinforce Captain Phillips and complete the mission we started. We go not as conquerors, but as liberators. We go to show the galaxy that humanity keeps its promises. He paused, thinking about the words that would send Earth's children into the void. The Vaxari sent out a call for help that reached the wrong species, but maybe it reached exactly the right one. All ships, prepare for jump. Operation Deliverance is now in effect. As the human armada activated their FTL drives and disappeared into hyperspace, War Commander Thex was receiving disturbing reports from his scout ships at the edge of Earth's solar system. War Commander, his intelligence officer reported, the humans have mobilized their entire military. Over 200 ships have just departed their system heading directly toward us. Thex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 200 ships? How is that possible? Our initial encounter showed only 12 vessels. The scout ships report massive industrial activity in their system. They appear to have converted civilian ships into military vessels and mobilized their entire population for war. This was unprecedented in Korath experience. Most species surrendered after losing their military fleet. No one had ever converted their entire civilization into a war machine just to continue fighting. What is the status of our fleet buildup? Thex asked. Field Marshal Crix has assembled over 400 ships for the assault on their homeworld. But sir, if they're bringing their entire fleet to us instead of defending their planet. Thex understood the implication. The humans weren't planning to fight a defensive war. They were coming to Korath space to finish what had started at Vel Prime. As news of the approaching human armada spread through Korath Command, fear began to creep into the minds of military leaders who had never known defeat. These aliens from the death world called Earth were not behaving like any species they had ever encountered. They were not trying to negotiate or find a diplomatic solution. They were not attempting to minimize casualties or protect their civilian population. They were mobilizing everything they had and bringing it directly to the enemy. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Korath Empire was facing an opponent that fought the way they did. But unlike the Korath who fought for conquest and glory, these humans were fighting for something far more dangerous. They were fighting for each other. The stage was set for the largest space battle in galactic history, with the fate of multiple civilizations hanging in the balance. But as the human armada raced toward its destination, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire world, no one could have predicted how completely the galaxy was about to change. The human armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Korthak system in perfect formation, and the sight that greeted them was beyond anything they had imagined. Over 400 Korath warships hung in space around Vel Prime like a dark cloud, their massive hulls bristling with weapons. But Captain Phillips and his original 12 ships were still there, battered but unbroken, maintaining a defensive perimeter around the planet. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Enterprise watching the tactical display as it updated with enemy positions. The Korath fleet was enormous, each ship dwarfing even Earth's largest vessels. But there was something different about them now. They weren't moving with the confident aggression they had shown before. They were arranged in defensive formations, as if they expected to be attacked. "Admiral," reported Captain Hayes, "we're receiving a transmission from Captain Phillips. Put him through." Phillips's voice came through the speakers, tired but determined. "Admiral Morrison, good to see you. We've been keeping them busy while we waited for reinforcements." Morrison smiled grimly. "Status report, Captain. We've been playing cat and mouse for the past week. Every time they try to mass for an attack on the planet, we hit their flanks and force them to break formation. They've learned to respect our firepower, but they're still got us outnumbered 20-1. "Not anymore," Morrison replied. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Form attack formation Delta. We're going to show the Korath Empire what happens when you threaten Earth's friends." The human armada spread out across space in a formation no alien military had ever seen before. Instead of the traditional line of battle tactics used by most galactic civilizations, the humans arranged themselves in small, fast-moving groups designed to hit hard and disappear before the enemy could respond. War Commander Thex watched from his flagship as the human fleet took position, 212 ships against his 437. By all logical calculations, this should still be a Korath victory. But something about the way these aliens moved through space filled him with dread. "War Commander," his tactical officer reported, "they're not following standard battle doctrine. Their formations are chaotic, undisciplined." Thex studied the display more carefully. The human ships were indeed moving in ways that violated every principle of space combat he had learned. They left gaps in their lines, created overlapping fields of fire that could hit their own vessels, and seemed to ignore the tactical advantages of their larger formations. Then he realized what he was seeing. It wasn't chaos. It was controlled aggression. These aliens were positioning themselves not to fight a defensive battle, but to hunt. Field Marshal Crix's voice crackled over the communication channel from his command ship. "All Korath forces, commence attack. Destroy the human fleet and secure this system for the Empire." What followed would be remembered as the Battle of Vel Prime, the largest space engagement in galactic history, and the turning point in humanity's relationship with the rest of the galaxy. The Korath fleet moved forward in their traditional attack formation. Massive ships arranged in neat lines designed to bring maximum firepower to bear on enemy positions. They had used these tactics to conquer dozens of worlds, and they had never failed. But they had never fought humans before. The human response was immediate and devastating. Instead of meeting the Korath advance head-on, the smaller human task, forces scattered like a swarm of angry bees, attacking the alien formation from multiple angles simultaneously. Fighter squadrons led by pilots like Lieutenant Steve Hamilton dove through the Korath lines, their small ships performing maneuvers that would have killed any other species. "All fighters, this is Eagle 1, Hamilton reported over the radio, as his squadron tore through a formation of Korath cruisers. "Their targeting system still can't track us when we pull more than 8 Gs. Use that to your advantage." Marine Colonel Parker's assault ships punched through the Korath defensive screens and began landing troops on the larger enemy vessels. What the Korath found when human Marines boarded their ships was unlike anything in their experience. These aliens fought in the corridors and compartments of enemy vessels with a savagery that seemed impossible for civilized beings. "Admiral," reported Captain Hayes, Colonel Parker's Marines have secured 4 Korath cruisers and are fighting for control of a 5th. They're asking for additional troops to hold their positions. Morrison nodded approvingly. Human boarding. Tactics developed through centuries of naval warfare on Earth were proving devastatingly effective against aliens who had never experienced close-quarters combat. But the real surprise came when the Korath tried their most devastating tactic, targeting civilian populations to force enemy surrender. War Commander Thex ordered his ships to begin bombardment of the Vaxari survivor shelters on Vel Prime, assuming the humans would break off their attack to protect innocent lives. It was the worst mistake the Korath Empire had ever made. Captain Phillips's response was broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Phillips to all Korath ships. You have just made the biggest mistake in your species' history. Humanity doesn't negotiate with genocidal monsters. We end them. The human fleet's response was swift and merciless. Every ship in the Armada focused their fire on the Korath vessels that had targeted the planet's surface. Within minutes, 6 massive enemy warships were reduced to burning wreckage, their crews dead or dying in the void. But more than that, the attack on civilians had triggered something primal in the human forces. The careful tactical engagement became something else entirely. A war of extermination against an enemy that had crossed humanity's most fundamental moral line. Admiral Morrison's voice rang through the fleet communication channels. All ships. New rules of engagement. Any Korath vessel that targets civilians is to be destroyed without quarter. Show them what happens when they threaten innocence in front of humans. The tide of battle turned completely. The Korath, facing an enemy that grew more dangerous the more desperate the situation became, found themselves outmatched at every level. Their superior numbers meant nothing against opponents who fought like their lives depended on every battle, because for humans, they always had. By the end of the engagement, over 200 Korath ships had been destroyed or captured, including Field Marshal Crix's command vessel. The remaining Korath forces, barely 100 ships out of the original 437, fled into deep space carrying reports that would terrify the Empire's leadership. In the aftermath of the battle, Admiral Morrison found himself in an unprecedented position. The human fleet-controlled Korath space had captured dozens of enemy worlds and was receiving surrender requests from alien civilizations across the region. But more importantly, they were receiving visitors. Ships from the legendary hegemony had finally arrived, drawn by reports of the massive space battle. Their representative, Hegemon Prime Zanak, requested a meeting aboard the Enterprise. Morrison met the alien diplomat in the ship's conference room, with Captain Phillips, Ambassador Zeth Kai, and Dr. Turner present as translators. Hegemon Prime. Zanak was tall and elegant, with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes. He moved with the grace of a being from a low-gravity world, but there was unmistakable authority in his bearing. Admiral Morrison, Zanak said through the translation system, I bring greetings from the Hegemony Council. We have observed your recent actions with great interest. Morrison studied the alien diplomat carefully. Hegemon Prime, we received a distress call asking for your help. When you didn't respond, we came instead. Yes, Zanak replied. We are aware of the circumstances. The Vaxari signal was indeed intended for us, but I must confess we were hesitant to engage the Korath Empire directly. Their military capacity was considerable, and we preferred diplomatic solutions. Diplomacy doesn't work with genocidal empires, Phillips interjected. Sometimes the only solution is to stop them permanently. Zanak's expression was unreadable as he considered this. Indeed, your species has accomplished in weeks what we failed to achieve in years of negotiation. The Korath Empire is effectively broken, their military scattered, their conquered worlds either freed or under your protection. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The Hegemony Council has authorized me to make you an offer. We would like to welcome humanity as a member species with full representation and— No, Morrison interrupted. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Zanak's eyes widened in surprise. Admiral, perhaps you do not understand the honor being offered. Membership in the Hegemony. would make us subordinate to a council that let 17 civilizations die while they talked. Morrison replied firmly. Hegemon Prime, with respect, we're not interested in joining your club. Dr. Turner looked uncomfortable at the diplomatic implications, but Morrison continued. However, we are interested in working with you, as equals, not as junior partners. Humanity has learned something important in this war. Sometimes protecting the innocent requires fighting the guilty, and we're very good at fighting. Over the following months, the galaxy began to adjust to a new reality. The Terran Protection Protocols, established by President Rodriguez and ratified by the Global Defense Council, committed Earth to defending any civilization that